This episode is brought to you by the Command Presence Leadership Institute. Find out more by visiting commandpresence.net.
Welcome to the Faces of Leadership with Michael Warren. Be the leader you wish that you had.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Faces of Leadership podcast, where we believe that leadership is about two things. It's about people and it's about actions. We talk with leaders from across society who are stepping up to do what they can, where they are with what they have. The question is, what can we learn from them? What can we learn from each other as we strive to be the leader we wish we had? Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Warren, and I'm your host. Thank you for being with us today. But folks, I have to start this episode off with a little bit of a somber moment. This week, as we're recording, a good friend of mine, a man that I admire, Paul Searle, passed away this week. Just real quickly, Paul was one of the very first police cadets that I hired when I started a cadet program at my agency. Paul was a leader in that program, and this is a kid that was a childhood cancer survivor, and throughout his life, he suffered a number of physical ailments that precluded him from becoming the police officer that he wanted to be because he was passionate about being a police officer. He was a police cadet. He did become a reserve police officer before his medical conditions got worse. But this week I was informed that he had been placed into hospice. And then unfortunately I received the word that he has passed away. So I just wanted to say as we start this program that, Paul, I love you. I admire you, and I'm going to miss you, buddy. My thoughts and prayers go out to his lovely wife, Sarah. Sarah, we're all here for you. If we can do anything at all for you, please let us know. On to today's guest, folks. Our guest today has been shooting for over 25 years. What started as a love for firearms as a youth in the woods of Virginia grew into a lifelong passion for performance shooting. His training roots are motivated by a lifestyle of self-defense and preparedness, but we believe that competition breeds excellence and focus on practical shooting training principles to push the envelope of what's possible behind the gun. Our guest started seriously competing in USPSA Carry Optics Division in 2018 and was able to go from unclassified to master class in under 6 months, making the highest possible classification of Grandmaster in just 21 months. Since then, he has focused on major match performance, collecting a number of major wins and podium finishes, with the latest CO Nationals finish at 25th place overall American. Our guest has had unique opportunities to train and shoot with some of the best shooters and instructors in the world and is passionate about passing that knowledge and experience on to others. He has currently personally invested in over 300 hours of professional shooting training and continues to seek out new sources of information each year. He is especially grateful to have spent significant time learning from a handful of world champions. From this education, our guest has built a curriculum not based on his personal techniques or any of the specific techniques that have propelled these shooters to success on the world stage, but rather those techniques which are designed to help shooters explore what will work best for them. Everybody, please welcome to the show, Billy Barton. Billy, thanks so much for being here today, man. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, sir. I appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this.
I've been looking forward to this. I'm nowhere near being in your arena, but I was a firearms instructor for my agency for about 2 decades.
Okay.
But you speak at a much higher level. I'm your community college grad. You're probably the PhD guy. When I heard about you, though, man, I just had some things I really wanted to talk to you about because some people say, well, what does this have to do with leadership? Wanting to be transparent with our listeners, we talked about this because you asked me the same question. What in the world are you going to want to talk about? And so I want to kind of go in reverse order with you than I normally do. What does it take for someone to get to the top of their chosen field? And I ask that because I think a lot of times there's this misguided belief that getting to the top is either luck or it's talent or some combination of both. But it's been my experience. That's not the case. So has that been your experience?
Well, it's funny. It's so funny that you say that because it's certainly been my experience and the other top shooters that I interact with. Like whenever you do something with a gun that people would, otherwise assume is impossible, everyone just loves to rush you and be like, oh my word, that was amazing. Your natural God-given talent is like so crazy. Like, you were just born with something that's like, man, you should have been there when I started. It was not anything to write home about. You know what I mean? Like I was full on struggle bus like everybody else, and I think it probably depends a lot on the field. There's statistics out there, like about the NBA as an example. Like, man, if you're like an American who's 6'9" or over, you have like X% chance of being in the NBA, that kind of thing, where like your genetics matter a whole lot. What's cool to me about shooting is like, man, you look at world champions in the shooting community, and they don't look anything like each other. You've got guys like a 6'6" skinny, Nils Jonasson going against a jacked, 5'2", Casey Eusebio or whatever. And it's like, man, they're just going head to head. So, as near as I can tell, when it comes to shooting, like there's very little in terms of like genetic limitations or like natural talent that like makes you a good shooter. If you know how to be a good shooter and you understand the techniques and how to train, and you're passionate enough and dedicated enough to go out and actually put the work in, like you will be good at shooting is kind of how it works. Like there's very little limitations there. As long as you got like 2 hands and arms and eyes that work and all that sort of thing. It's just down to, I think in my field anyway, really primarily just the drive and the dedication to going out and putting the work in and being consistent and staying after it for a long period of time. There's not any real secret sauce to it.
I have 4 kids, and the 2 younger boys are wrestlers. And
Sure.
I saw a quote one time that I shared with them, and I'm going to screw the quote up. But the essence of the quote was, your medals are earned during practice. You just pick them up at the tournaments. And so would it be accurate to say that whatever places that you get in some type of contest, those are earned in your practice sessions? You're just picking them up when you go to the competition.
I think so, for sure. Yeah, you're not going to figure it out at the match, for sure. It's just like, it's just similar to the famous saying in law enforcement, like you don't rise to the occasion, right? You fall to the level of your training. And that's exactly how it is for us in the performance side of the house as well. Man, that foundation's built there. Really the biggest thing that you run into, and again, this has a ton of applications to law enforcement as well, but what the match is really all about is the mental side of the game. Like, okay, you should have a pretty good idea of, hey, what are my on-demand abilities that I am bringing to the table right now? And then it is from there, okay, what do I need to do on the mental side to actually perform as close to my 100% level as I can without actually allowing the wheels to come off and having, catastrophic failures occur. So having a really good estimation of what skills you're bringing to the table, and then having that mental process to just execute on demand is what it's all about.
I love talking about these types of things right there, because in the world of leadership, I think that we often forget that even with the best preparation, even with the best team assembled, that when you go to compete, whether it's in the business world, in a sports field, whatever, there are variables beyond our control. You can do all the practice you want, but when it comes shooting day, you can't control how windy it is. You can't control if it snows or it rains, and all of those factors have impact on the way that you perform. How do you, as an elite performer, handle those variables when they're not ideal? Because I would be willing to bet that there are very few ideal shooting days that you get.
Yeah, 100%. Wow, there's a lot that could be said there for sure. To me, I think the biggest secret is trying to account for as many of those variables as you can in training, right? Like that's a big piece. You're never gonna go through every scenario in your training, but if, like you said, if you're only ever going to the range or practicing whatever your discipline is, like when the conditions are ideal, and then you're expecting to be able to perform well when the conditions aren't ideal, like that's probably not a formula that's setting you up for success. So I really try to take advantage of when I have the opportunity, when it's a training day and the conditions are not ideal, I am definitely not skipping, right? It's like, okay, it's raining today. Perfect. I'm going to go out and do double the amount of training I would do normally because, you can't just schedule, okay, this is going to be my rainy day to go train. So when they pop up, I'm going to definitely take advantage of that and actually go put the work in or whatever that condition may be, trying to actually replicate, those likely variables you're going to encounter in training. Definitely set you up for success for sure.
This may cause us to lose like one of our 4 listeners for the podcast right here. Okay. But it's one of those things where I like sports analogies because I think sports analogies, it translates so well no matter what domain that we're operating in. But it always amazes me how the very best golfers and the very best tennis players, in order to achieve the level of concentration they need everybody to be quiet. They've got people at the competitions that are throwing up quiet signs. But in the real world, very rarely do we have ideal conditions in which to operate in. In fact, we have to operate in spite of those conditions right there from a mindset perspective. How do you prepare yourself if you're going, if you have a competition scheduled for tomorrow and you look at the forecast and you say, oh man, it's 100% chance of rain. So I know I'm going to get wet and it looks like there's going to be wind gusts. Well, everybody has to deal with them. It may be a different level wind gust. So how do you prepare your mind to be ready to handle those things?
Yeah. So, I think for me, it's a couple things. Number one, you mentioned the distraction element, and to me, it's very analogous to like, what we're doing in shooting. Like, yes, it's supported by the hard skills, right? You need to be able to press the trigger straight, not move the gun, and you need to know how to aim and that kind of thing. But really, what you're doing is you're doing some kind of problem exercise. You're just the gun's just the tool that you're using, right? And so what we run into is a mental bandwidth limitation, where you can only be consciously thinking about so many things at one time. You bring up golf. Man, I'm in one of those families where like my dad tries to, drag me into a family golf game like once every 2 years or whatever, and I don't touch the clubs in between then. And so, man, when I get behind that ball, I'm having to consciously process okay, how much is the club head rotating? What are my elbows up to? What are my hips doing? What are my feet doing? How well do you think that goes for me? Right? Like not very well at all, right? You can't consciously think through all those things at speed. So this is where on the shooting side, it's like we have to rep out the hard skills, if you will, to that level of subconscious competence where, man, like the shooting piece is just running in the background, right? It's not requiring that mental bandwidth. So that frees up the conscious mind to be doing problem solving, right? Whether that is being aware of, what your target is up to, whether it's being aware of your environment, whether it is being like, okay, for me on the competition stage, like no run is ever going to go perfect. Like not every single step on that stage is going to land exactly where I planned for it to land. And so, what I'm pretty much doing when I say problem solving, like I'm doing course correction. I'm observing, okay, what just didn't go exactly the way I planned it? How am I going to get back to the plan? How am I going to get back on track where I want to be? And the shooting's just kind of happening off to the side and I'm just kind of observing it, So on the problem solving side, I think, one of the biggest superpowers there is just really having those hard skills programmed in to where they can kind of run in the subconscious. And then you talk about, suboptimal environmental factors as well. Obviously you want confidence is a big deal. And so whenever you have I think an environment like that, you observe it and that makes you concerned about your performance. Like even if it doesn't really impact your performance directly, that's not the mindset you want to be having when you want to perform at your best. And so again, I think the more that you can prepare yourself in training, it's like, man, when I go to match and I find out it's going to be raining or whatever, I get excited because I'm like, man, I bet you I have trained in the rain way more than these other dudes and I have an advantage now, right? And so if you can, training to me really is, again, the superpower there for the mindset. It's not, I don't believe in like false positive self-talk or like false confidence, right? Some folks can talk themselves into some things maybe, but man, if it's actually based in reality, you're like, hey, I'm actually prepared for this. I know how to deal with this problem probably better than the rest of these folks do. And that's where that confidence is going to come from and allow you to just do your thing, right? And not have all that static going on in the background where you're concerned about all the variables, like you said, that are outside your control.
Man, that mental static to me has always been more disturbing and more disruptive than the environmental things. 100%. Confidence begets competence, and competence, but it's a cycle. And so for leaders that are out there, because you opened up several things there I want to hit on, if you don't mind. Mm-hmm. In my world, we call it unconscious competence.
Yep.
We want to be able to use our limited mental capacities for decision making. I teach in my class, I always ask the question, is it important that our people know how to pull the weapon up out of their holster, bring it up on target, squeeze the trigger and hit what they're aiming at? Well, of course it is. But in our world, it's at least as important, if not more important, to know when to pull the weapon up out of their holster. And if my mental bandwidth is taken up on those physical skills, then I don't have the capacity to make as good as decisions. So if I want my people to make better decisions, then I need to make sure that they have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to handle the physical component of it. Would that be an accurate statement of what you're talking about?
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. Yep.
All right. Then the next thing you said, man, hey, listen, not every round's going to go perfect.
Right.
My one son is a goalie in soccer. He plays, my kids play several sports, and I'm constantly telling him, say, man, listen, you're not going to go through your career with a clean sheet. Okay, you're going to give up some goals.
Yep.
Where you need to do is not let one goal turn into two, and not let two turn into three, because that sense of defeat, nothing's ever going to go completely according to your plan. If you as a shooter were to get out there in a competition and you throw a round, if you focus on throwing that round, what's it going to do the rest of your shooting?
Right. Yeah, for me, this is where we talk a lot about process focus versus results focus, right? So if I'm going into, in my case, a match or a competition, and all I'm focused on is, hey, here's what I want the outcome of this day to be. And all of a sudden, the likely outcome of that day starts changing in my perception because things are either because things are going really well or going really poorly. Then that's likely to influence the way that I approach the rest of the performance that I still have to complete, right? Whereas, man, yeah, sometimes we can observe those things and make strategy decisions and so forth, but when we go in to actually perform, it's got to be focused not on the outcome, but on the process, right? I know exactly what I need to do and how I need to do it to perform as well as I can, right? If a better performance than I currently possess the capability to put up is required to get the outcome I'd like to have, like, too bad, I don't have it right now, right? And if I try to push past my current capabilities to make it happen, that's just, opening the door wide open for catastrophe, right? So really just focusing on the process instead of the results or the outcome is how you get that consistent high level performance. And sort of just that consistency is huge for us, right? And versus those peaks and valleys. And so that process-based focus is crucial, I found.
I love that, man, because processes are things that we can control. Right. And again, there are variables that are out there that affect the outcome that are beyond my control.
100%.
So then I obviously, in my career, I dealt with a lot of new shooters.
Oh, yeah.
And so with a lot of new shooters, one of their things is they're looking for the perfect shot. Mm-hmm. And you'll see them up there. You've probably seen it where you've got them up there and their arms are up and they're looking for it to be the bullseye shot every single time. And they hold it up there so long, waiting for the perfect shot. You can see their arms start to fatigue, right? And they start shaking a little bit. And you start talking about first best shot. You're never going to have a perfect shot. And the longer you wait for the perfect shot, the less likely you are going to get a good shot. And I think that translates across domains as well. I think that we have a lot of leaders that are looking for the perfect decision. And as a result, they put off making a decision. And the result is they end up with a worse decision. So as an elite performer, how do you get to the point where you just trust the fact that this right here is good enough?
Yeah, in fact, it's a super interesting question, right? And I think what's crucial to separate there is training versus score performance there as well, right? I mean, I think a lot of the times what you're talking about there, working with new recruits or whatever, it's like, man, in training, in most domains outside of shooting, like, it's very well understood that the way we progress, the way you grow, the way you get better is through failure. Like, that's actually where the growth comes from. I mean, think about, like, fitness would be a good example. Like, man, if I want to be able to put more weight up in my bench press, is going to the gym every day and doing the same reps of the same weight going to help me grow? Like, no, right? I've got to put more on there, or I've got to push past my current capabilities, right, until that failure occurs. And that's what actually stimulates that growth. And realistically, the same thing is true in shooting or anything else. So much of the style of training that I do is like, man, failure is literally the goal. Like when I'm in exploration mode, when I'm trying to figure out how to do things either faster or more accurate or whatever it is, it's like I can't be just doing things I'm comfortable with. I can't just be repping out the same drills in the same speeds and standards that I'm used to that I do every day if I want to get better. I've got to push past that, right? So unless I'm pushing to the point of failure, like there's nothing for me to tweak, there's nothing for me to change, nothing for me to experiment with. It's just all going fine. It's like, okay, cool, I guess I can go home now. So literally failure is the goal of the training. It's pushing to where we start to see those wheels fall off. And then when we start to see that failure occur, it's like, okay, the answer to that is not to slow back down to where I'm comfortable again. It's like, I'm going to maintain this pace and figure out how do I gain control at this new threshold. And then as soon as I do, as soon as that group starts to look pretty again, it's like, nope, time to go faster again, right? That's the whole goal, is pushing to that point of failure, right? And so I think a lot of times in the range, we approach all of our training with that 100% accountability type mindset. And it's like, yes, that is a thing on the street for sure. But what's very obvious to everyone in law enforcement is like, we've been doing the 100% accountability mindset in our training for decades now. And what it's producing is, 12% hits on the street. So it doesn't actually work, right? It doesn't work in training. We have to be open to failure and open to pushing past our current capabilities if we actually want to grow and build those skills that are going to give us that accountability in performance.
Well, you probably heard this, and I know I heard it a bunch of times during my career. We tell people, so listen, if you're going to fail, I want you to fail in training. Yeah. When somebody fails in training, we often ridicule them, we make fun of them, or we fail them in the course. And so what we're really saying is we don't want you to fail. And that's the only way to grow. Correct. I would be willing to bet, and maybe I'm wrong, that you have not won every single competition that you went to.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I think it's a reframing of what winning looks like. And to me, what winning looks like, I go back to my kids, my goal, and I tell them every single tournament they have. So listen, my goal for you this tournament is number one, that you have fun. Number two, that you do the best that you possibly can. And number three is that you're a better wrestler at the end of the tournament than you were at the beginning of the tournament. That if you lost, you learn something to look for. And it's the only way of finding out the limitations of me personally, the limitations of my weapon, or in business, the limitations of our technology. Mm-hmm. There are limitations to this, but we have to know what they are so that we can try to address them. We can look to expand them. Would that be an accurate statement there?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, when I'm running classes with folks, I tell them right at the beginning, I'm like, hey, you're primarily only going to get like 2 pieces of feedback from me after we shoot an exercise. What you're not probably going to hear a whole lot of is like, good job. Like that's a waste. That's a waste of both of our time, right? Like 100%. Like now, granted, sometimes folks need that positive affirmation, right? But like the valuable feedback is going to be, if your target is showing me problems, it's going to be like, okay, those rounds didn't go in the right spot. Why? What do we think the problem is? What can we tweak to get them to go in the right spot? If you have a pretty group and all of them are just in like a nice fist-sized group in the middle of your target, the only feedback I'm going to give you is go faster next time. You didn't go fast enough, right? Like that's it. That's the only 2 options, right? Like so it's never just like, what I don't want is for you to come up and crush all these drills. That's a waste of everybody's time. That's just turning money into noise. We're not growing. We're not getting better, right? And so I think that's a super, crucial mindset change that we need in training if we actually want people getting better.
Would you agree that when somebody feels like they've arrived, that they've stopped growing, and that's not the pathway to elite performance right there? Yeah. And I see that all the time. If you're on your team and it doesn't take much. If you're on a SWAT team or something, and you're the guy that's going to the range on your own time a couple times a month and practicing and doing some dry fire at the house and that kind of thing, like you're probably the best shooter that you know. Right. And when you're the best shooter that you know for a while, it's super easy to start thinking, man, I'm about as good at this stuff as I can get. And as soon as you start thinking that, like, you're right. That's so stifling for growth, right? And this is one of the huge
value adds, I think, to competition. And one of the reasons that I encourage a lot of law enforcement guys to actually get into competition as well. Because as soon as you show up at that local match and the local 70-year-old plumber or some 13-year-old girl kicks your ass at the shooting piece, all of a sudden you're like, okay, maybe I'm not as good at this stuff as I thought I was. And like my potential is way greater than I thought it was. And without learning anything new, just that mindset shift can sometimes just unlock growth potential for folks, and they just take off and they start getting better again, you know? So yeah, as soon as you start thinking you're as good as you can get, that's not a good place to be in for sure.
So then that kind of leads me to the next part I wanted to talk to you about. Oftentimes people think when they get to that pinnacle, whatever that pinnacle may be, whatever domain that is, that once they've arrived, that they don't have to keep up the same pace that they did before. And I think the science very clearly shows that you're either getting better or you're getting worse. The plateau is a myth. You know, I talk about in class that if you get to the point where you can bench 300 pounds and then you stop lifting weights, you don't stay at the ability to lift 300 pounds. It starts to go down. It's incremental. What would you tell people about the importance of continuing once you've gotten there so that you can stay there? Because maybe staying there is even more difficult than getting there in the first place.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the crazy thing is in any competitive environment, which is what we're talking about, right? Man, the goalposts are always moving. So it's like, man, you get to even if you really did get to the peak of that mountaintop, that mountain is taller tomorrow than it was today. Somebody else out there is still working, right?
Right.
And they're going to catch up and they're going to pass you in a hurry. So, you know, for us, that's a crucial thing. It's like there is no goal. It's not like, man, here's how good I want to get, and then we'll just stop right there. I'll be happy when I reach that. You know, I think if you really want to be, like you said, not only be elite but stay elite, it's a constant process of continuing to innovate, continuing to do new things, continuing to find new ways to do things that people thought were impossible, you know, yesterday.
Right.
And it's a constant process for sure.
One of the other reasons I was really interested in talking to you, and so I'm going to depose you here for just a second, ask you a couple questions here. Okay. Do you have a law enforcement background?
No, not at all.
Okay. Do you have a military background?
No, sir. Military brat a little bit, but no experience myself.
Okay. But as I understand it, you do training for law enforcement.
I do. Yeah.
I want to know why it's so important that we go outside of our areas, our domains, if you will, to find better ways of doing things. Because I think that when we stay within our domains, our professions, then we stifle our growth at that point. A lot of times the answers to what we need are outside. We just need to go out there and find them and then find ways to integrate them. So when you go out and you train law enforcement, for example, do you ever get any kind of pushback sometimes from people who say, what does this guy know? Man, this guy's never gone on patrol before.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Of course. You know, the tide is changing in that regard. You know, these kind of concepts take a long time to kind of trickle down. You know, when you look at tier one performers, whether that's guys like in the military, as an example, like Delta Force or the Navy SEALs or whoever you want to look at, right? Those guys have been go outside of the military for all of their training, essentially, right? So it's like, man, when those guys, as an example, you know, want to learn how to jump out of airplanes better, they don't go to Green Berets. Like, I mean, do they know about skydiving? Like, yeah, for sure. But are they professional skydivers? Like, no, they have a whole bunch of other stuff they have to think about every day, right? So they go to Team Red Bull or whatever to learn about skydiving, right? Like the guys that all they do every day is like pack their chute, they go jump out of an airplane, then they do it again, right? And that's what we do all day, every day, right? Those are the guys we go to. I consider myself fortunate. Like, man, I look at, you know, law enforcement officers, military guys, like, man, these guys have got to be a jack of all trades. There is so many things you have got to be good at and spend your time learning and training on. I'm fortunate enough to not have to do that. I live, breathe, eat, and train shooting. That's all I do every day, right? So, you know, generally, I think if we, you know, when I want to learn about something, I'm going to go try to find like what are the guys that spent the last 2 decades like doing this all day, every day, and in shooting, that really is, you know, performance and competition shooters. So when I do training for law enforcement or military guys or whatever it is, like, it's like, look, I'm not here to tell you how to do your job 100%. That is not my lane. What I can do is teach you how to be really fast and accurate with rifles and pistols, right? That I can do. I'm going to give you a whole bunch of tools to put in your toolbox that lets you do things really fast and accurate with these tools, and then like figuring out where and when to pull those out and how you're going to apply them and where you're going to fit them into your team SOPs and all that kind of stuff. Like that's for you guys to figure out for sure. That's not what I do, but the fast and accurate piece I can help with for sure.
What you do in computer vernacular is you clear up some of the RAM for them.
Yeah.
You give them those physical skills so that they can use their mind on other things. Well, I always talk about it in class, too many people, and it doesn't matter the profession, they're satisfied with conscious competence. Somebody who can do a skill, but they have to consciously think about, almost like they're going through a checklist, but checklist takes up bandwidth.
Right.
That may be okay if you're sitting in an office, but it's not okay if you're in a shootout.
Sure.
And so that's what leaders should be looking to equip their people with, is the ability to be able to think. But it's not just the ability, it's the ability to know how to do other things so that I can think.
100%. Yeah. Huge for sure.
So let me ask you this. I told you we were kind of going to go backwards with you here. So what type of shooting is it that you do? I mean, when you go to competitions, for the benefit of the uninformed, what type of shooting is it that you do?
Yeah, so the primary sport that I engage in on the competition side is called USPSA, United States Practical Shooting Association. And it's essentially what we call practical action pistol shooting. So it's sort of a run and gun sport. It's really cool in that, there's a lot of sports out there that assess the hard skills, stand and deliver shooting. How fast and accurate are you? Like that's great. The USPSA does a lot to test the movement piece as well, by making it like larger dynamic courses of fire and the strategy element. So a lot of times, mostly in our sport, it's like, hey, maybe you have to start here. Maybe it says start anywhere. And then it's like, we're going to give you a beep and you got to shoot everything as fast as you can. Like where you go and what order and all that sort of thing is totally up to you. So that it really turns it back into that problem solving exercise where not only do you have to figure out the most efficient way to solve these problems with the gun, but also like you have to build those plans based upon a really solid assessment of your skills. Like, hey, am I going to be better off trying to shoot these targets on the move, right? Or hey, because that's a 20-yard, hostage target or whatever, I better run to this spot and stop and shoot very carefully, like that kind of thing. So you have to have a really good self-assessment of your capabilities and then build a plan not only that is efficient, but that is going to be suited to your skills and your strengths and weaknesses the best. So we have a lot of fun with it for sure.
The competitors that are going against each other, they're shooting the same course, but they had the flexibility to shoot it in a way that plays to their strengths.
100%.
It's not this mandated, this is target 1, this is target 2.
Correct.
To me, that's more, we'll lose one of the other listeners now. It's more applicable in the real world than perhaps like Olympic shooting.
Correct. Yeah, I would say so for sure. Yeah, everything we do in USPSA, has the balance of speed and accuracy. We use a scoring metric called hit factor, which I use a lot in law enforcement training as well. It's a really good metric for balancing speed and accuracy. So, pretty much anything we do in tactical or defensive shooting, it's like, yes, accuracy is really important. You got to hit stuff or nothing else matters, right? But also, if you can't hit stuff in time, it also doesn't matter, right? So speed and accuracy are always an element. So it does a really good job of making you be fast and accurate all the time, working all the skills. So speed and accuracy on targets of varying difficulty, gun handling, target transitions, and movement. And then that problem solving element as well. So it's a thinking man's game, and it really does a little bit to test that mental bandwidth piece, I think, as well as that piece where you have to have a really good self-assessment of your own strengths and weaknesses too, which is great.
Well, one of the things that we talk about in our leadership classes is that everything comes with a cost.
Yeah.
Some things cost you time. Some things cost you money. Some things cost you discomfort. In this type of shooting, accuracy comes at the cost of speed a lot of times, and speed comes at the cost of accuracy. And it's a way of finding that balance. Mm-hmm. But you really can only find balance through, like you said, pushing yourself out of the comfort zone. And I think that's a valuable lesson for leadership. If you're comfortable, if you never have any stress, then you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough.
Yeah, for sure. And, when it comes to performance, that's where to me, that process-based focus comes in. So it's not, if you think about speed and accuracy as just like a sliding scale and you've just got to pick a spot, right? Well, when you get under pressure or under stress, most people translate that pressure as pressure to go fast. Like, that's what I need to do, right? And so the accuracy is probably going to suffer. Whereas for me, it's like, hey, yeah, I got to go fast, but also, for every target that I look at, there is a sort of a minimum required formula of what I need to see, right? In other words, how carefully I need to aim, what I need to see from my sights on this target, what's the confirmation level that I need, and how carefully do I need to press the trigger to make sure I don't move the gun off the target, right? To guarantee the accuracy that I need on this target. Now, whatever that formula is, I want to execute it as fast as I can, 100% of the time. Going any slower than that's a waste of time, right?
Yep.
And this removes that pressure element, right? Because now I don't have, the pressure to just like make everything chaotic and just go fast and just like hope I get lucky. It's like, nope, I'm going to have the patience, right? To wait until, and there's no reason to let that gun go off until I've checked those boxes. What I need to see, do I need to have my trigger prep, that kind of thing. And then everything else is at 100%, right? 100% speed the whole time. And then just waiting for permission from the sights to press the trigger. And that really helps. Wait,
explain that right there, man. I like that thing. Waiting for permission from the sights to press the trigger. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, especially when you have the ability to plan it out ahead of time, I'm gonna pick a level of confirmation that I need on that target. Hey, what do I need to see on this target to guarantee hits? Do I need to see, if I'm shooting a red dot as an example, because it's a difficult partial like hostage style target, or it's at really far distance or whatever. Do I need to see my dot like actually still stopped stable in the center? Is it okay if it's still moving, but just in the central area on target? Or is it, a 5-yard open target where I just need like a flash of color on that thing? I'm going to hammer it, right? What do I need to see? And there's no reason for me, if I know that that's what I need to see to guarantee the hits that I need, there's no reason to ever allow that gun to go off until I've seen that. Right. So you're essentially just waiting when hopefully my eyes are going to already be on that target, and I'm just waiting for those sights to essentially give me permission to press the trigger and break those shots. Trigger essentially gives me permission to do everything else. Right. When that trigger breaks, that's permission to, leave, go to the next target, or to leave and go to my next position, or whatever it is.
That was put well. I love that. So let's go back a little bit further backwards.
Sure. Okay.
How did you get in this type of shooting? What was it about it that drew you to it? Because to someone who's never seen it before, it looks chaotic.
Sure.
It almost looks reckless, but there's nothing reckless about the way you go about conducting one of these stages, is there?
Hopefully not. Yeah, no. So it was a long journey, and for me, it's one of those things. It wasn't like maybe you talk to NFL athletes or something. It's like, man, I wanted to play football since I was like 5 years old or whatever. Like, I didn't know this sport existed, right? So it was not, this wasn't the plan that I had the whole time when I first got into shooting or anything. You just kind of like wake up one day and you're like, wait a minute, I'm doing some stuff with guns that like nobody else in the world can do. That's pretty cool, right? But it was just kind of a long process. I started shooting when I was very young, but just very much like backyard shooting soda cans, that kind of thing. But absolutely fell in love with it. Been passionate about it for a long time. Really got into shooting and training more heavily, like everybody else does, from that self-defense, home defense, concealed carry type mindset. But was fortunate enough, I think, to have the realization pretty early on, like, man, a gun is not a magic talisman. You can just wave at problems and they go away. Like, it's a tool. And like any other tool, its effectiveness is limited by you and how well you can actually use this thing, right? And when you look at the kind of situations where you need a gun to save your life or the lives of your loved ones or whatever it is, like, man, the level of performance that's often asked of you is pretty high. So got into, performance shooting style, just training strictly from, the concealed carry mindset and that kind of thing for me, just trying to build my skills up as high as I could. And it was funny, you were talking about that mindset limitation earlier of how much it can limit your growth when you aren't aware of like the potential, how much better people can be. I took a class back in the 2015s somewhere, and I was, the best shooter in the class by far at that time. And the instructor came up to me afterwards and he was like, hey man, he's like, are are you training or practicing with anybody who's better than you are? And I was like, no, I ran out of those a while ago. Right. Mm-hmm. And he's like, you should go shoot competition. And I was like, really? He's like, I said, why? He's like, because you will find people there who are better than you are. And I said, word, let's go. Right. And so that's literally what got me into it. Just to me, it's a tool to learn things, to push the limits of performance, and to get better at shooting is really what got me into it. And I went and shot my first match, and I just got hooked immediately, and have been into it ever since. And it's been one of those, again, those monumental shifts that just raised the floor or the ceiling for me on what I thought was possible. And allowed me to pursue things a lot further and grow a lot farther in my shooting than I would have been able to otherwise, I think.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask you a personal question. You can tell me it's not. You can tell me it's none of my business. But people often talk about the conversations they have with their parents when they tell them what their career path they're going to pursue is. When you were talking, because you talked about your dad and golfing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
When you told Dad, say, hey, you know what, Dad? I said, I think I got a future in this here shooting thing. You know, I think this may work out for me. How did he handle that? How did he respond to your ambitions in that area?
Well, like I said, look, when I first started in this deal, it was nothing to write home about, right? And so they were probably rightfully skeptical about the amount of time and effort that I was and resources that I was putting into training and shooting even before I got into competition, and rightfully so. Like, it didn't necessarily make sense, I think, on paper. And frankly, even though maybe I've quote unquote make it, and I made it, I don't know, do this for a living now. If I hadn't spent all this money on ammo and training and shooting, like, could I have been more successful, like, monetarily in another field? Like, probably, right? But like, I wouldn't have enjoyed it nearly as much. So, rightfully skeptical, I think, for sure. But it is what it is. And I think that, the passion and the drive that I had to go after something that maybe didn't make sense is almost like the X factor that you kind of have to have. It's like, man, no matter how much discipline you have, somebody else out there has the discipline to go train, and they love it. And I've heard some of the greats in other sports like Kobe and so forth talk about that. Like, man, there's almost no substitution for that passion and that actual love of the game, of what you do. And you need the discipline on top of it sometimes, but that's a huge factor for sure. Man,
as we're wrapping things up here, it's a very fine line, at least in my experience, between a healthy never satisfied and an obsessed never satisfied. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be down on myself, but I think it's important that we all recognize that no matter where we are in our chosen profession, no matter where we are, our skills levels, we have the opportunity to get better. And it's just if we have the willingness to do the work to achieve that. Yeah.
And not only the willingness to do the work, but the willingness to just be brutally honest about where that work needs to be done. Like, what are the actual weaknesses in your game? What are the things in whatever your chosen discipline are where you need some work, right? What are the things where you need to improve? Where are those spots that you're not performing up to par, up to your own standards, and identifying those things, and with just brutal honesty. And when you do identify those, not, like you said, not being depressed about that, but being excited because we've now identified an opportunity for growth. Man, when I discover that there's a lot of potential for me to grow in a particular thing in shooting, either because I made a mistake or because, man, I saw someone else do something where I'm like, I didn't know that was possible, but now I do. That's super exciting, right? Because all of a sudden I've identified, a new area where I can go and get better. And of course, the closer to the top you get, the harder those are to identify. Yeah, shouldn't be a discouraging thing when you identify those things. It should be exciting, if anything.
Well, one of my favorite books is Peak Performance, and they talk about in there what separates world-class performers from, the beer league people. Sure. Is that the world-class performers are intentional in their practice, and their practice tends to focus on things they need improvement in, not on the things that they're necessarily good at, where everybody else, we want to feel comfortable. And so we pray, if I'm a good free throw shooter, I'll spend a lot of time at the free throw line in practice or shooting threes, whatever the case may be. But it's intentional improvement in areas that need improving.
Yeah, I can talk about training all day, but I'll say this quickly. I think it'll have some application for folks. It's like, man, it's super, super easy to go to the range with a bucket of bullets and not get better at shooting. 100%, right? Mm-hmm. Just quote unquote getting reps is not the way you get better, right? It's really not. For me, in shooting, every round that we fire has a particular point of assessment. I'm trying to assess trigger press or vision or grip or a combination of those things or target transitions or movement, or I have a specific point of assessment, the thing that I'm looking for to measure, is the gun behaving the way that I want it to or not? Here's what a good rep would look like. Here's what a bad rep would look like. And if it doesn't look the way that I want, here's a list of things that I'm going to experiment with or tweak or change to get it behaving the way that I want, right? That sort of intentional, like you said, or deliberate practice where you're intentionally assessing particular points of performance and have a plan on how to improve those points. Man, that's where the growth comes from in any skill, I think, that you're trying to build. And it's way less fun than just showing up at the range with your buddies and just burning some ammo, doing some drills you like to do or whatever. But if you want to actually get better and you want to actually improve your skills, like that is the way, I think, for sure.
That's fantastic. So we've reached the point in the program where I'm going to review with you my biggest takeaways, and it's your chance to expound on them or say, yeah, Mike, that's right, or say, Mike, you're an idiot, and say that's not what I said at all. And one of the things you said at the very first that really hit home to me, you said people are watching me and seeing me do things that everybody else thought was impossible. But what made it possible was the work you put in before you got to the point where you were showing them those skills. Would that be accurate?
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. The next thing is that no matter what domain we're in, no matter what job we're doing, there are always going to be variables beyond our control. What we should be looking to do is account for as many of those variables in training as you possibly can. Not everything's going to be accurate, but as my good friends Brian Marin and Greg Williams like to talk about, is it cognitively close enough for me to be able to deal with it? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
yeah, if in no other way than like, man, we've added complexity and made you think about and do problem solving. Right. Even if it's never going to be, you think about tactical scenarios, or whatever, it's never going to be the identical scenario on the street that you did in training. But the fact that you had to problem solve and think through similar situations, right, is going to give you the ability to do the same thing.
Unconscious competence, the ability to perform certain tasks without the conscious mind frees up the conscious mind to make better decisions. And that only comes through training.
Right. Yeah, that's where the problem solving ability, I think, comes from, is that unconscious competence with your tools, right? So that the brain can be focused on the environment and observing and making decisions, like you said.
Can I ask you a question just to follow up on that right there?
Yeah.
When you're going through one of your competitions, you're running one of the stages. Mm-hmm. Would it be accurate to say that more of your mental bandwidth is taken up with you as a tool rather than the tool that you're carrying, because you're so competent with that tool? You're thinking more about, what do I need to do? What position do I need to get us in, you and your weapon in, to be able to do this? Am I moving? Am I leaning out? Whatever the case is, but it's more focused on that than on that tool, because you're unconsciously competent with that weapon.
Yeah, because we have the opportunity in my sport to plan everything out in extremely granular detail ahead of time and visualize that and memorize it, and we know everything we want to do. I mean, the ideal stage run is you're just observing what's happening essentially in the conscious space, right? You're not really consciously controlling anything, but in reality, what's probably going to happen is you're observing and then you're noticing things that didn't go exactly to plan, right? Hey, that gun went off before the dot was perfectly centered. Was it on target good enough, or do I need to make that up, right? Hey, I made it up, which means I shot an extra round here I didn't mean to. Do I need to reload earlier, or do I have enough, right? Like so that's the kind of course correction processing I think that you're doing a lot of times as you go through, is just kind of observing things that maybe didn't go exactly according to plan, and then doing the problem solving or getting you as close to being back on track as you can be.
I love that, man. Next thing, not every round is going to be perfect, but growth only comes through failure.
Yeah. Yeah, not only is not every round going to be perfect, but if it is perfect, you're wasting time in training. Pushing to that point of failure and seeking that is the entire point of training and how we get better.
And then you said this one right here really well, man. You said the goalposts are always moving, and we need to be too, because if we're not, somebody else out there is. And it's hard to get to the top. It's hard to stay there, but it's very easy to get passed up if I'm not willing to put in the work.
Yeah. Somebody else is out there putting the work in. So if you're not, you're getting left behind.
Absolutely. And then the last thing here is the whole idea of going outside your profession to look for answers. It's the ability to grow as a person, as a professional. I think one of the biggest things that leaders need to be willing to do are to entertain new ideas.
Sure.
And I think it makes us stronger as an individual and as a team.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, man. Well, I've got to ask you this as we wrap things up. You did some training here recently down up in Northeast Tennessee, and I understand that you were out on the range with my good buddy, Miles Cook.
I was, yeah.
Miles is a heck of a good guy, and he fancies himself a pretty decent shot. But do you think he learned anything during the training? Because I've got an answer from him. But do you think he learned anything?
I sure hope so, man. I have really, really enjoyed working with Miles over the last couple of years. Did a class about a year ago now for a bunch of his firearms instructors that are there at the academy. And I hear that they've revamped quite a few things that they're doing as a result in their training, and they're seeing some pretty incredible results from it. And, Miles, you just talked about leaders being open to new ideas. Man, Miles is a perfect example of that. You never know. You talk about pushback from different spots. I mean, Miles showed up, didn't know who he was from Adam when he showed up in one of my courses. Just another guy in, head to toe multicam with all the tactical stuff that shows up. And you're always like, okay, as a competition shooter, you're like, okay, is this guy like here to work, or is he here to tell me I'm wrong about everything? Like which way is this going to go? Right. And he just got after it. And was just open to everything and trying everything and seeing, okay, does this work or does it not? Right? We're gonna give it a shot and see. And so he's a perfect example of a guy like that that's always open to innovations and new things and trying new things. And I think that he's seeing a ton of success as a result, and it's been really cool to see.
Yeah, so Miles, just so you know, buddy, that part wasn't rehearsed. I surprised him with that one right there. You passed the test. But Billy, man, thank you so much for being with us today. I love talking with people who are elite performers, and you certainly fit into that category. So thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to us. 100%.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. And for our listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed the episode, and we sure as heck hope you did, if you didn't, you probably should do a self-evaluation there. Be sure to follow the podcast on your favorite podcast provider. You can also find this episode and all our previous episodes on our website at commandpresence.net/podcast. You can also check us out on LinkedIn. Folks, we've really been trying to put some stuff out there. Make sure you take a look at us over there. And as you go throughout the week, please remember, be the leader you wish you had.